Hi everyone, Curtis here from Goth Rider Creations, and today is the third and final episode in how to make your own resin fretboards. Stay tuned. So, here's the part everyone's been waiting for. Let's see what these things actually look like. So, we've got all three of them ready to go, all completely dry, all lovely. Little bit of housekeeping. You saw me glue on the hardboard to turn this into an actual mould so then I can fill it with resin. I used hot glue, gun glue, as you saw, and I don't like that stuff. If you get it right, it works really well. If you get it wrong, you get pinhole leaks everywhere, and that's exactly what happened. I knocked up 75 millilitres of resin, put a little bit of blue tint in there, poured it in place, came back an hour later, and most of that resin was all over the cardboard. Thankfully, we put down the cardboard, so it wasn't a major issue, but it didn't work. So what I did was I mummified it in tape, but before I did that, I mummified the whole thing in silicone, which is what I should have done to start with. I was a little bit eager to try and finish it off. So yeah, I waited for the resin to cure, then I went in with about a quarter of a tube of silicone and just covered the whole thing. Then I went back over with my vinyl repair tape and made double, triple sure no more leaks. And then I poured 75 ml resin in there. Remember I was saying about leveling up your project so it doesn't pool on one side? I don't know if you can see there, this side you can still see most of the fabric, that side is pure resin, so it kind of, yeah. Thankfully this one, it's barely a millimetre, and that resin was only there to fill the gaps in the pieces of fabric, so it's not a major issue. So that one's fine. So first of all we're going to do the flat layup because I dropped it and the board came off anyway, so unfortunately we're not going to get that satisfying crack as it comes out, but let's move these and get that one looked at. So here we go, and oh, here it is. Nice and flat. There is a little bit of extra resin on that end. You can just see a shiny bit and a tiny bit there, but this is exactly what we wanted. Now, demolding. I see a lot of people doing this wrong, and it's kind of annoying. Your best bets really are to use wedges and scrapers. Do not use filling knives. They are too thin, they are too flexible. You stick that underneath it, all you're going to do is bend your knife. It's a waste of time. So let's get the right tools and get this popped open. Right, so scrapers. Old school, not flexible, not very flexible, is ideal. Also, you can get tiling wedges, but I just have these spare from what I generally do cleaning up my free timber anyway, so these are always good. Trying to use a hammer. Sounds stupid, but this is glass. You don't want to be smashing around too much, so literally back of a flat-headed screwdriver. Again, you can use a flat-headed screwdriver, be careful, glass. So just be gentle, and all you want to do is literally just flex it enough that you hear the crack. Once you hear the crack, that is it releasing all the way across. So sometimes a lot of people use compressed air, which is another good way of doing it. If you've got a more complex mold, you're worried about it locking in. This is a flat plate, so it shouldn't be an issue. So let's give this a go. And there we are. That was nice and satisfying. So there we have it. Right, okay. Not enough resin. You can see there, you've got gloss to a point, but not quite enough. So it's covered most of it it just hasn't got that perfect sheen. So this is actually a very good example of what to do. Now, you don't want to be using this side because that was the back of the denim. So you're going to want to be using this blue side here. Now, your best option really is to give it a really light sand and then do what we call a flood coat. And all that will be is literally knocking up a little bit more of the resin, pouring it on, and then very carefully shaping it so it is nice and flat. Resin will self-level, most resins will self-level, so you don't have to go too crazy, but you don't want to be wasting a lot of resin. So you knock up a small amount of resin, pour that on there, and then just let it flow wherever it needs to go. And as long as you don't get any air bubbles, that will generally give you a really nice clean surface. So we will get that done in a little bit so you can see what's involved there. The actual shape of the board is quite nice. I was careful with the lamination, so it only kind of has strange laminations on the side, on the ends. The sides are actually quite neat, so that'll do. And it really does not have a lot of flex at all. So I've seen ebony fretboards flex more than this, so this will be absolutely fine. So that's number one. Let's try and crack out the second. Right, and there's number two. It probably wasn't necessary me cutting off the bit of hardboard that's stuck on there, but I just wanted to see what it would look like. Generally, if any of that happens or you get an extra ledge like this, it doesn't really matter, because then when you're actually cutting up the fretboard to get it to size, you get rid of that anyway, so it really isn't a major issue. But there we have it. So the top, you see the fabric through there. The back is mostly pretty good. There are, on this top edge, there are a few air gaps there, which is slightly unfortunate. If it had completely had all of the resin there, you could have literally just sanded and buffed up this edge and then you're ready to go. As it will be, it will probably be a case of me sanding this down and then flood coating it like we're going to do with the flat panel. But there we have another one. Right, and now let's pop out the last one. This should be the easiest. Oh, thankfully it didn't leak anywhere. There was only a little bit of resin from when that one leaked. So let's just pop this out. And there you go, easiest of the lot. So yes, the brown tape did a really good job. The only places where the metal seems to have impinged is in the corners, where obviously it's crumpled up and the resin can get in there and kind of almost lock it in place, but none of it is stuck. It quite easily peels away. So that's that, and This one I'm loving most of all, because we poured the resin in there and we do use a lot more resin. We have got a nice sheen, so this could just be sanded down and worked on. Because of the irregularity of the bottom, not really. So if we'd done this in a proper mould, we would have been laughing. I don't know if you're going to be able to see, but the pattern in that looks fantastic. I love how that's it. I was kind of aiming for forged carbon fibre, and it definitely has that kind of a look. So this is my favourite of all of them because it's not the regularity. So this is brilliant. This top texture is awful and is going to mean I'm going to have to sand back most of this to get a usable blank. So now all it comes down to is the finishing. Now, thankfully with resin, everyone seems to be a little bit scared of resin and they're worried that they can't do much with it. You can cut it as you would a piece of wood. It is denser, but you can cut it with a handsaw, you can cut it with a bandsaw, you can cut it with a jigsaw, you can cut it with a table saw. You can use pretty much anything really. Same again with the sanding and shaping. You can put the resin through a thickness planer, you can put it through a drum sander, you can sand it. The only thing I would say is obviously because of the denseness of it, it is quite hard. And if your resin is not completely cured, it will be slightly tacky and it will gum up your sandpaper instantly. So make sure once you've got it out the mold, you give it another day, maybe 2, before you go sanding on it, because where it was in that mold, there might be the odd little pocket in a corner somewhere where it hasn't fully cured. Resin doesn't air dry as such, but air does help it dry. So once you've got it out of the mold, give it a look over, but sometimes you will get the odd tacky spot, so just be aware of that before you start sanding. If you're sanding, you notice it's coming up your paper quickly, just stop, leave it a day, go back and try again. So save you a lot of materials. So what we're going to do for this one, I'm just going to sand the base of it, see what it looks like. That should be fine as is. These two, I am going to sand them back and then try and do the flood coat on these so I can show you what's what. The other option you can do for the resin other than flood coats is to use a lacquer. A lot of people think that you've got no main options when it comes to painting these things. Lacquer works really well and it does hide a lot of the scratches. So what you can do is sand this back. You need to get it past 150 grit. I like to go down to 320, similar to what you would do if you're spray painting. Get it down to 320 and then spray on a coat of lacquer. Unfortunately, I don't have any to hand here to show you, but automotive lacquers, furniture lacquers, polyurethanes, pretty much anything, spray a good couple of heavy coats of that on there, and as long as your sanding isn't too deep, you will actually get rid of most of the light scratching and then you will see a nice smooth finish. Go gloss, don't go matte, because otherwise you'd never really notice it. And the final option, again unfortunately I don't have to hand, is hard wax oils. It's what you see a lot of the time on the videos of people doing the river tables. It's Rubio Monocoat, I believe, is the most well known. There's also Pollux oil. I'll see if I can find the name of it. But those hard wax oils are amazing because you literally just pour it on, squeegee it on, use a cloth, use a roller, whatever, put that oil on there, leave it for about 5 minutes and then buff it off. And then you will get a really nice sheen. It works really well with the river tables because the oil soaks into the wood as well as smoothing out the surface of the resin, so the two together works really well, but you can use that on these. The only thing I would say is if you're going to do fretboards or whatever else, do your fretwork first, cut it to shape first, do all of your final sanding before you put the oil on, because if you try and fret the fretboards afterwards, the oil will be getting into your fret slots and then no glue will set. So you need to kind of do it the other way around what you would normally. With regard to fretting, you can use a normal fret saw to cut in your frets. It will cut as you would do any piece of ebony. The only thing I'm not sure about, because these are my first, is with regard to the adhesives. Now, this is where you will have to experiment yourself. Most people I've seen who do this either use super glue or use a thick set resin to put in the frets. Theoretically, Titebond or something like that, aliphatic resin, might work. I've not tried it myself. I know that Titebond and things like that, alkaline, works on things other than wood, so theoretically that could be fine. It's also possible that polyurethane resin, try not to use the normal Gorilla Glue because that'll just foam everywhere, but something like that is also multi-use glue, so if you get the non-foaming version, that might actually work as well. In my experience, it is a little bit flexible, so that might not be the best option for frets, but that will have to be your experiment. From the ones I've seen, Burl's Art being the perfect example, he either super glues or resins in his frets, so that's something to look at. But enough of my waffling, let's get these sanded. Right, so that didn't go as well as I'd hoped. I've trimmed up the edges of the flat mould, so that's all fine. We're just going to have to literally just do a coat over the top. It will just be putting something underneath it, floating over a layer of resin, smoothing it over, letting it kind of self-level, and then that will fill in all of the roughness and whatever else. I didn't go too crazy with the sanding because how porous this is. If I go too crazy on the sanding, then I'm going to leave a lot of marks that I won't be able to hide with the resin when I flow coat it, so that I've basically got to leave as is. The other two I managed to sand off a bit and get a little bit neater, but the problem is they're not thick enough. The blade I have on my table saw is not amazing, and I would want to make sure I've got at least 3mm worth of, not curve, but leeway either way. Now this one in particular, we're looking at about 15mm thickness. So when I take into account for the thickness that I want to worry about for the blade, you're looking at a 6mm blank, and that's with no deflection. If there is any deflection, we're going closer to a 5mm resin blank, and that's not good enough. You can work with a 5mm thick fretboard, but I wouldn't want to chance it. Once you put the radius in there and the frets, that's going a little bit too thin. And with the scraps one, I managed to sand the bottom a bit, but the amount of work involved will be crazy. It will take about 2mm to grind all of that off. Now, I would actually really like to be able to slice it similar with this one with the table saw, and there's just not enough thickness. So, these things happen, it's the nature of things. If I hadn't skimped and just gone a little bit thicker with blanks, it wouldn't have been an issue, but to be honest, I didn't actually think about making 2 blanks out of these. I just thought it'd be one, sand it down and done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a custom mould out of a bit of plywood and some melamine hardboard, and then I'm just going to pour 3mm, 4mm of resin on each one, get it a little bit thicker, and then I'll be able to put both of them through the table saw, split them in half, done. So it will literally be these two together in one mould, flat, and then I will just pour a decent chunk of resin on there. Once that's done, I can split them both down the centre to separate them, and then go for the table saw. So yeah, Little extra step, but these things have to be done. So we'll quickly make that mold, pour in that resin, and then in a few days' time, we can do what I planned to do originally. So bear with me. So there you have it. I didn't go too crazy with the sanding, as I'm sure you could see. It also was not ideal that the blade on the table saw is so blunt it was burning through these things rather than cutting them. And I'm sure you noticed as soon as they came off the table saw, they were floppy as anything. It seems that the heat really does affect the resin. Now, thankfully, now that they're dry again, they're brilliant. There's a tiny bit of flex in them, but they're perfectly within what I've seen of ebony fretboards or maple fretboards. So yeah, those are really decent. So there we go. The flat denim looks absolutely beautiful. As you saw, I didn't go too crazy. I just literally threw on a coat of lacquer just so you could see, sanded down to 320. That's all you really have to do with these. If you want to polish them, then by all means go through the grits, go down to 3000, all good. With these two, where you've actually got exposed fabric, there really isn't much point because you're getting those grain lines in there. So for me, go down to 320, 400 grit, and then put on a lacquer or put on a very light coat of epoxy just to seal it in, and you're ready to go. I absolutely love the grain on these. I think it looks really, really cool. The one I love the most is the scraps. The random pattern on that is absolutely amazing. But there you have it. That is how you make resin fretboards, Micarta fretboards. You know, as I say, these ones aren't perfect. I don't really have the ideal materials. If you could put them in the molds, make them, and then run them through a thicknesser planer or through a drum sander, something like that, you would get much better results. This is a bit kind of DIY, but it proves the point. So there you have it. Thank you very much for joining me. Slightly protracted tutorial, I know, but I believe that, you know, getting the right information out there, you know, if it helps someone, I'm a happy man. So there you have it. Micarta denim resin fretboards. So yes, please throw us a comment. Let me know what you think of the finished fretboards. Let me know if there's any other information that you would like, if this is something you want to do. But please subscribe if you haven't already. I'm going to be making a lot more of this kind of crazy stuff. So yes, thank you very much for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Take care.